Okay, H&K fans, James here with another video for you. As you can see, I'm back here in the gray room at H&K headquarters in Columbus, Georgia, and I'm here after hours. Everybody else has gone home for the day, but I'm sticking around to provide you a video on the VP9 series. You're probably out there seeing all the other videos that are popping up on the new VP9A1 with its release, and I'm going to cover that as well, but those who follow my channel are probably familiar with the deeper dive that I give you. And I've done video series on all the other models from H&K. I've deliberately postponed doing the VP9 series because I've known that the A1s were coming for some time. I've wanted included. So if you just came here because you want to learn about the VP9 A1s, trust me, I'm going to give that to you, but you can fast forward towards the end of the video. But for the rest of you guys, I think you'll appreciate the deeper dive that's going to cover the history, the design features and unique safety mechanisms in all the different variants and models of the VP9 series. Hopefully answer any of those questions that you might have about the why behind this or that on these variants. And then we'll wrap up with the new A1 series at the end. So I hope you're as excited as me. And I hope that you have yourself a tasty beverage. I've got one sitting here on the other side of the table, and hope you can find yourself a comfortable place to sit so that we can dive right in. So to start off, I always like to give kind of a historical perspective on where H&K was at any given time leading up to the release of a new product. And there's several handguns that influenced the VP series. Probably most notable for H&K with this was the USP series, designed and released in the early 1990s in what I consider the second generation of H&K. It really was a revolution. You know, polymer construction they'd been doing before, but now we had a move away from some of these more unique designs like gas retarded delay system in the P7 series to utilizing the Browning tilting barrel short recoil operating system and more of a traditional double action, single action, as well as other variants that came into this weapon. The polymer construction, obviously that leads to ease of manufacturing, lower cost, but still a higher profit margin and much faster and simpler to produce than having to, rolled and stamped steel construction or milled steel receivers. This USP being the revolution, all these other handguns from H&K that would follow, the P2000, the HK45, the P30, these were just evolutions of that original design. Just slight modifications to it externally and internally to do that. But when they moved to the VP9, you see that carry over, but now a change from a hammer-fired firearm in all of those other lines to a striker-fired gun. And that takes H&K back towards their earlier roots with originally the VP70, VP standing for Volks pistol. I've got a whole video on this as well, which was H&K's first striker-fired pistol, as well as their first polymer-constructed pistol, something that we see across the board from manufacturers now. Everybody's making polymer guns. This was the first one from H&K. Striker fired in this one, where it actually uses a full double action type trigger, where the striker is fully at rest and you use a double action trigger pull in order to pull the striker back, place it on the sear, and then release it again. The VP70 was followed up by the P7 series. Now a gas retarded delay system pistol, but still striker fired. This one again, striker at rest until we squeeze the cocking lever, drawing the striker back to the rear, readying it to fire, releasing the grip safety, allows the striker to move forward safely without firing around unless you pull the trigger. Got a whole video series on these as well. That striker fired system and the polymer construction is what they would go back to looking at when they wanted to update the original hammer fire design. The question would be why? Why would you need to update from those? We had USP, we had P2000, we had HK45, and we had the P30, okay, which again, evolution of the original USP design. Well, it came to a point where H&K was competing in contract requirements for military contracts, law enforcement requirements, and over the years they were able to provide a USP model, a P2000 model, an HK45, a P30 model. But they got to a point where they were competing against striker-fired firearms, and they were entering a hammer-fired firearm, to the point where now in these requirements there actually would state it has to be a striker-fired gun. And in that case, it could meet all the other requirements for size and magazine capacity and other specific features, but it couldn't even be submitted because it was a hammer-fired gun, and those requirements would call for a striker-fired gun. So that took H&K to have to go back and redesign this. They did so in a really unique fashion of trying to have as much carryover from, in this case, the P30 that preceded it, so that you had the same kind of user intuitive form and feel of those people who are already familiar with the P30 series, and in many cases trying to has cost savings as much as possible in things like magazine compatibility. So if you had a P30, now you buy a VP9, the magazines carry over. Things like the sights on the pistol would carry over from the P30. Those cost savings measures would do that. Being able to showcase this here in the gray room, it comes with its own added benefits, and one of those is to showcase to you this. This is, as you can see here, this is VP9 serial number 1. Okay. And if you look here at the slide, you can see it's actually labeled P30X, and if you look really closely, you can see that this has actually been milled out. Okay? This is the original model that H&K Germany brought here to HK USA to say, hey, here's the new pistol that we've designed, what do you guys think? And you can see that they had already tried one naming convention, decided that didn't work, and came up with another. You can see P30X is what they came for, because this was the evolution of the P30 series. Obviously, we didn't go with P30X, we went with the VP9. Kind of the story around the building here is that when they presented it to us, the answer was, well, we can't call it that. And they said, well, why? And I said, well, there's this exercise program called P90X, and we'll probably get sued if we call it something like that. So pretty funny, though, to see an example here in the gray room that's actually not only is the first one, but shows kind of the design evolution in a naming convention where they would do something similar like that. So really unique example here. Now let me go change the camera position so I can show you actually the table, and we'll go through all of the different models and specifically the features. Okay, so let's start off looking at the P30. The P30 was considered a duty size weapon, not a compact model, but slightly smaller in dimensions than the original USP. You can see the key features on here are the ergonomic grip with exchangeable backstrap and side panels. You can see paddle mag release for ambidextrous controls there, as well as elongated and ambidextrous slide release, full Picatinny rail at the bottom, got cocking serrations on the front and back, 3-dot sights. You can see here this is the luminescent style, and it's a hammer-fired gun, this one in DASA. This was the basis for what we would do with the VP9. So when the VP9 came along, you can see very much similar dimensions from the P30. As we lay them on top of it, the P30 is just slightly shorter here at the front. And if we put them in the back, you'll notice that the VP9 is slightly shorter on the height. Okay? But the carryover between the two is very, very obvious. Okay? Released in 2014, this hit the market in a big splash. And what I think is most impressive from H&K's marketing standpoint was they made a conscious decision with the release of the VP9 to lower its individual cost. these are still are, but at the time were significantly less expensive than the hammer-fired models that preceded it. And what this allowed them to do was to make less money on every individual sale, but make up the profit in volume. And the real success was that it opened up an entire new category of ownership to people who before just did not have experience with H&K because it was at such a price point that they couldn't reach it. Or if they had tried it, they just were not into hammer-fired guns and decided they wanted striker-fired guns. And because with the cancellation of the P7 series prior to this, there was no striker-fired option from H&K. So an immediate success from H&K. They released this as a VP9 as well as a VP40. And you can see the 40 has all the same features as the 9, but if we compare the two side by side, what you'll see is that the 40 slide is just a little bit wider in dimension. You'll probably notice it here in the top view as well than the 9mm, obviously to deal with the higher pressures associated with the 40 caliber cartridge. So that's what we got initially from H&K in the VP9 and 40. I'll go over the other variants here in a minute, but let's showcase these key features of the weapon. Well, first and foremost, as it came initially, you had a 15 round magazine, 9mm capacity. In the 40, you had a 13 round magazine capacity. Obviously, for the band states, you had a similar size magazine, but limited to 10 rounds. This same magazine carried over from the P30. So if you had a P30 already, you can use the same mags in those, and it carries over from the 9mm models of the USP Compact and P2000. Though this is a longer magazine in 15 round capacity than those, this same magazine will fit in those other weapons. So that compatibility was a big hit. Starting here at the top, what you'll notice here are cocking serrations on the front and rear. And this one has the optional tritium night sights from H&K. They were also offered as a standard feature with the luminous dot sights. So H&K at the time offered the VP9 and VP40 as a standard configuration that came with 2 mags and your luminous dot sights, or what they call the LE package, law enforcement package, which came with 3 mags and the tritium sights. The difference between the two, obviously, tritium's going to glow all the time. The luminous dot sights will glow when they're exposed to some sort of lighting, but are only going to hold that glow for a certain period of time, and then they're going to die out if they're not continued to be exposed to it. So when you have these and they're activated at night, you'll actually get a brighter glow off of these. They're more rapidly accessible or identifiable on the luminous dots than you will on the tritium. The downside is, though, once they're not exposed to light, they're going to die out. So if this was something that you were having as a bedside drawer home defense gun, well, there's no light in your bedside drawer. So if you wake up to a bump in the night at 2 in the morning and would pull this out, those wouldn't glow. Or if you had this in your holster and you're getting some ambient light that's glowing this, well, it's dark in the bottom of your holster. You're not going to have light there. So not as ideal as tritium, but the reason why we have those is because the tritium sights are actually a restricted item over in Germany. So we're not able to send the pistols here to the U.S. with the tritium sights. They'll actually come in with these luminous dots, and then they're either sold like that, or we'd remove the luminous dot sights, install the tritium sights, and then they'd ship out. So hopefully you understand the different sighting configurations at that point. The other unique thing here on the slide is at the rear, you'll notice this exposed rib here on the side. These are actual polymer inserts. You simply drift out the sight over to the left, and you can slide this in or remove it, and then same thing on the right. These are called charging supports, and it's one of the things that when I saw it for the first time on the VP9 when I received my first one back in 2014. I thought, man, how come nobody else had figured this out? This is so intuitive. What it gives you is better purchase when I'm trying to manipulate the slide to charge it. I can either come over the top and grab that, or from the back. If I had sweaty hands or the weapon's wet or muddy, you just get a better grip on the weapon with these charging supports. Very, very intuitive. At the rear, you'll notice that the end plate is open and you can see this little red paint. This is a cocking indicator that's on the firing pin. So when the weapon is cocked, either manually because I cycled it the first time to load the weapon, or every time I fire and the weapon goes through its 8-step cycle operation, this will cock again. This is not a loaded chamber indicator. It just lets you know it cocks. So in this case, I have an unloaded weapon. If I pull the trigger and release it, you'll notice that it goes back inside the weapon. So that's what that is. Moving down here at the front, you'll see I now have a full-length Picatinny rail section for mounting lights and lasers. And then you have the standard elongated trigger guard for use with glove hands, rounded with a nice cut there. And then we have our ambidextrous paddle magazine release for use on both sides. Very, very intuitive. A lot of H&K fans have come to use this. I've always found it very nice where I can either use my middle finger or come down with my firing finger and manipulate it versus having to break contact where I would on a button release sometimes with my thumb. Very intuitive for magazine releases. Then you'll notice your rotating takedown lever. We'll get more of that in the safety features, and your ambidextrous slide lock slide release. It's on both sides. This is a carryover from the P30 series that preceded it. You can see we have those same types of features. But on the P30 series, you can see that it extends all the way from the beginning to the rear, exposed on the side. With the VP9 series, they decided to house it inside the receiver, and it's only exposed on this rear section that you'd actually manipulate. This helps prevent, if you have different types of grips, that you wouldn't be manipulating it at a further forward position, only in its exposed position back there. And then obviously it's ambidextrous on the other side. Moving down to the grip, you can see that we carried over the same type of grip features as we have on the P30. The grip texture is slightly different on the VP9 here. Aggressive, but not so aggressive to be a nuisance if you're carrying this concealed up against your body. You can see some slight finger grooves here on the front, and you have removable back strap and side panels. Each one of your VP9 series pistols would come with 3 sets of side panels and 3 sets of back straps in small, medium, and large sizes, so that you can adjust the fit of the pistol to the specific shooter. They would ship with medium-sized side panels and back straps in there, and the other parts are in there. And I'll take a little time to kind of get on a soapbox here and mention this. This is one of the things that I've noticed over the years, especially when I teach training courses, that most people don't even look at that. They pull the gun out of the box, they take the spare mags out, and they throw the box with all the other accessories, in the closet, and they don't change them out. So you really want to use the customization of these to fit the pistol to your hand. And what you're really trying to do is get proper placement of your trigger finger on the trigger. If the grip panels are too small and it presents my finger too far, well, then my trigger finger is going to stick out the side of the trigger, and when I pull the trigger, it's going to naturally cause the gun to pull to my left. Likewise, if they're too big and I barely got any fingertip on there, it's going to make me pull to the right. What I'm trying to do is get the tip of my finger here, and I apologize about how dirty my hands are. I've been working around guns today. You're trying to get the pad centered on the trigger. So adjusting that grip size to that position on your trigger finger is really what you're after. And then you can see down here in the magazine at the bottom of the receiver, you've got these little indentions here. And what this does is correspond here with the magazine base plate, so that if I need to strip and rip a magazine out, I can gain some purchase here with these indentions on either side of the bottom of the mag well to grab the magazine and pull it out of the weapon. You can see integrated lanyard loop serves dual purpose as the roll pin that holds the back strap and side panels in place. And you can see that I can really get high up on this beaver tail with this lower bore access, which is going meaning that the weapon's not going to kick so much under recoil. Those are your basic features of the VP9 series. Now, let me go through some of the unique safety features on the VP9 series. Okay, so safety features. I've got the access to one of our cutaway examples here that I'll showcase, as well as another standard model. The first one I'm going to talk about is probably the most obvious safety feature in here, and that is our trigger safety, or what some people have affectionately termed the dingus. You can see it here in the center of the trigger. And what this causes you to do is to actually have your finger all the way across the front of the trigger in order for it to fire. So if I'm just kind of off on the side of the trigger and it snags on something, I cannot manipulate the trigger to the rear. I have to depress the center trigger safety in order to allow the trigger to move back to the rear. I'll try and zoom in here with the cutaway here so you can see what I'm pointing at. So let's look right back here at this piece of polymer. That's the tail of the center of the trigger. You can see where it is now. Now watch when I press in on that trigger safety. You guys see how it moves slightly back? And I'm pointing right here. You can see where it moves back. In its at-rest position, it is up against a contact point on the inside of the receiver, and it blocks the rearward movement. But when I depress it in, it now clears that channel and allows me to pull the trigger back to the rear. So that's the first safety feature that's incorporated into all of the VP9 series weapons. The next safety feature is our takedown lever. You can see here mounted on the left side of the weapon. We have designed this to work that you cannot remove the slide. I'm going to try and pull it forward. It won't come off until I have rotated the takedown lever in the down position. But as you can see here right now with the magazine loaded, I cannot rotate the takedown lever, nor with the slide forward can I rotate the takedown lever. It is done this way by design to ensure that we have properly unloaded the weapon. So you have to lock the slide back to the rear. This encourages you to check the condition of the chamber, and you have to remove the magazine from the weapon before the source of ammunition, before I can rotate the takedown lever. And unlike many other striker-fired weapon designs, which then require you to have to pull the trigger to release the sear in order to get the slide off, on the VP9 series you do not. Rotating the takedown lever to the down position engages your disconnector, takes the trigger bar out of contact with the sear, releases it, and you can just move the slide right off the weapon. So the combination of having to check the chamber, unload the magazine, and not have to pull the trigger makes this inherently more safe than other striker fire designs for disassembly. So the next safety feature that's built into this pistol is a firing pin drop safety. Okay. If we look inside the slide when it's removed from the weapon, we're going to notice, here's your barrel, there's your feed pawl, and here's your striker or firing pin here at the rear. You'll notice this angled lever here off to the side. This is your firing pin block or firing pin drop safety. In its at-rest position, you can see it sits in front of this engagement point for the striker. This is what the sear engages with, pulls the striker back to the rear and releases to allow the striker to move forward and fire the weapon. In its at-rest position, it sits in front of the striker. So even if I dropped this or I shook it really hard and the striker had enough force to move back to the rear, as it tried to go forward, it would meet the front of this firing pin drop safety, and it would not be able to move farther enough in the firing pin tunnel to protrude through the opening on the breech face and impact the primer on a chambered cartridge. Only when it's swept out of the way, let's see if I can sweep this for you here in the camera angle. You see how it pivots off to the side? Only when it sweeps out of the way is the firing pin channel clear, allowing it to strike. This works in concert with the trigger bar. The trigger bar here on the right side of the weapon, you'll notice when I pull the trigger bar moves back to the rear. There's a little indentation here on the inside of the trigger bar, which makes contact with this arm on the drop safety and sweeps it out of the way every time I pull the trigger back to the rear. So you have to pull the trigger in order to engage the trigger bar. I cannot pull the trigger until I've defeated the trigger safety. Once the trigger is moving back to the rear, it will then sweep the drop safety out of the way so that we can then release the sear. Next safety feature on the weapon is the disconnector. And here I need to showcase how the weapon actually fires. We look here, on the center is your sear, and next to it is what we call the sear actuator latch, and then this is the trigger bar with this dog leg that comes over. If you'll notice, if I pull the trigger back to the rear, you're going to notice this dog leg arm on the trigger bar is going to push against the sear actuator latch, forcing it back, and as it goes back, it draws itself down, which will in turn draw the sear down. So here I go, I pull it back. It now is up against the sear actuator latch, and now I'm going to push the sear actuator latch back, and that draws the sear down. When the sear goes down, the striker would have been pulled back to the rear and cocked. It now is no longer holding the striker back to the rear, and the striker is going to go forward. That's how the normal operation of the weapon is every time you pull the trigger. The disconnector, which is this little indentation you see sticking up right here above the right side slide release, what this does is prevent out of battery fire. And how it engages with the trigger bar is, if you notice, when I push this down on the disconnector, it pushes the sear bar or the trigger bar down. Now, if I hold that down and I pull the trigger, you will notice that the trigger, sorry, I didn't have it there. The trigger bar still moves to the rear with the trigger, but now it is moving underneath the sear actuator latch. It's no longer engaging it, so it's not dropping the sear. If I release the disconnector, now the trigger bar can engage the sear actuator latch and drop the sear. When I hit the disconnector down, trigger bar goes beneath it. So I can still pull the trigger all I want, but this trigger bar is not engaging the sear actuator latch and sear. That corresponds with a cutout recess here on the inside of the slide. You can see this little kind of half moon cutout, okay? When the slide is in battery, that half moon cutout sits right above where the disconnector is, and it allows this to move as it should, no problem. But if the slide is pulled back any position out of fully in battery, that half moon cutout is no longer presented, and instead this lower portion of the slide is. That forces the disconnector down, which drops the trigger bar down, and so on. So what that means is the weapon has to be in battery in order for it to fire. Okay, so if the weapon wasn't in battery, I mean the slide fully forward, and I could somehow fire it short of this, well, if that round then went off, instead of all those pressures going down the barrel and then into recoil, they're going to go path of least resistance, up and out the top of the ejection port, down the mag well, and you could have catastrophic damage to the weapon or to the shooter. That's what your disconnector safety does for you. The other thing you have in here as a safety feature is your firing pin spring internal to there. A lot of people don't think about that, but the firing pin spring prevents you from just being able to shake the gun. Even if I didn't have the firing pin drop safety prevents that, but say this wasn't in the gun, I couldn't just shake the gun and have it go off. I have to have enough force to overcome the firing pin's resistance to allow that that spring to move, or the firing pin to move forward and engage the chamber cartridge. So those are your unique safety features on your VP9 series, and you'll see those carry over to all of the other weapons. There's one more that I'll show, actually two more that I'll showcase on our pistols here. The first one is your extractor indicator. You can see here at the top of the extractor, when I push on this, you can see this pivots the extractor out, and that shows you just this little piece of red paint on there. So if I had a cartridge chambered in there, the cartridge on the breech face would cause the extractor to move out slightly, and I can both feel it and I can see it, okay? That's our last safety feature on the standard models. Now, for the California compliant model pistols from the VP9 series, we had to incorporate two additional safety features. And I've got those built into this armory cutaway example. So if you have a California compliant VP9 or you're interested in buying a California compliant VP9, this portion of the video will help you as well. The first safety feature is an addition to that original extractor design. And if you look here closely, you'll notice that there's been a cut down the side of the extractor, and you can see that there's a smaller indentation in there. Okay, if I load this pistol up with dummy rounds, which I have here, and I chamber one into the weapon, you will notice that now it sticks out farther. The extractor itself doesn't stick out any further, but this additional indentation here at the top does. It sticks out further than original, and now it's more visible and it's more of a tactile feel portion for the pistol. Okay. The next thing that the California compliant pistols have is a magazine disconnect safety. Okay, so this is different than the standard configuration VP9s that have a magazine safety that requires you to remove the magazine before I can take the slide off, rotating this takedown lever. This is now a magazine disconnect safety in the truest sense of the word that most of us are familiar with, meaning if I have, again, my dummy round loaded in here, if I remove the magazine from the gun, it now locks up the system. So I cannot fire this weapon until I put a magazine back in the gun, and now I can fire it. So those two additional features, a magazine disconnect safety and this additional extractor safety feature, are what you're going to see on all of the California compliant VP9 series pistols. Now let me show you how the two different features relating to the magazine work within the weapon. And in this case, I've got the VP receiver, I've got the magazine released, and what I want you to look at is in here on the right side of the receiver, you're going to notice this little lever right here. Okay, with the takedown lever in the up position, if I insert a magazine, what you'll notice, again, look at where the lever is. When I insert the magazine will raise that lever up. Now it is against spring tension, and when I try and rotate the takedown lever, I can't, because this magazine's safety is engaged. But when I release the magazine, you'll notice the pressure is taken off, it falls down, no longer under spring tension, and I can freely rotate the takedown lever. So that's how it works from a takedown lever function. Now, with the armor cutaway, we're going to look at the same functionality. Now what I want you to notice is not only is there a dog leg lever moving towards the inside, which engages with the top of the magazine when it's inserted, but I also want you to look at this dog leg portion here that extends over the trigger bar. Okay, so if I insert the magazine into the pistol, just like before, it's going to raise that against spring tension. It raised this portion here engaging on the magazine, which is preventing the takedown lever from rotating, but it also rotates this dogleg arm up and out of contact with the trigger bar. But if I remove the magazine, it now drops this dogleg bar over top of it, and it prevents the rearward movement of the trigger bar. So that's how this updated feature works in both ways. The original models, the non-California compliant, do not have the additional dog leg that comes over the top that engages with the trigger bar. The new California compliant models do. Now, since I have the cutaway example, this also is a great opportunity for me to showcase the internal functionality and how these safety features work as well. You can see right now, here is the firing pin tunnel. There is your firing pin or striker, and it is being held back to the rear in this pre-cock state. And if you look back here in this angle, this is your sear, and there is your engagement pawl on the striker or firing pin. If I pull the trigger back to the rear, you're going to notice that this sear is going to drop down and it's going to release the firing pin forward. Okay. Every time the weapon cycles back to the rear, it's going to pre-cock this again. Okay. On the opposite side, I want you to notice here, this is this horizontally mounted firing pin drop safety. And what you're going to notice is when I pull the trigger, you're going to see the trigger bar, this little arm here, move back to the rear and engage, and you're going to see this firing pin drop safety or firing pin block pivoting out of the way to allow the firing pin to drop. And again, there's your engagement, Paul, on the bottom of the firing pin or striker. When I cock it again, you're going to see it drive the rear, and you're going to see the sear here at the rear. When I pull the trigger, releases, and it goes forward again. So pretty cool. Now let's look at a few of the other features inside the slides. I've got a 40 slide here on the left, 9mm slide on the right. The recoil spring assemblies. The 40 recoil spring assemblies are the silver or gray colored. You can see this one's obviously been used and the red's worn off, but all the 9mm ones traditionally have the red paint on them when they were done originally. The other thing I want you to notice in here that we didn't talk about, you're going to see this roll pin here. This is what holds the extractor in place. This other area here, you see off to the side of the firing pin tunnel, it looks like there should be a roll pin there. That's actually a gunk relief valve. And this is something that H&K has been doing all the way back since the P7 series, and they've incorporated into all the follow-on pistols and many of their rifles and subgun lines. What this does is take any kind of dirt or debris and carbon fouling and stuff that's going to continue to get pushed towards the front of the breech face. In that case, it could actually get so impacted that it would prevent the firing pin from moving through the opening on the breech. This gunk relief valve allows that dirt, debris, carbon buildup to go somewhere else, and with the constant recoil, it will just work its way out and then down through the magazine well. So a unique feature in itself. Okay, now let's talk about the barrels. If you've seen my videos before, you'll appreciate that I like to wax kind of poetic on this. If there's one thing I think H&K does better than just about any other production company out there, it is their barrels. The quality of the materials, the design and manufacturing process is really second to none. That carries over to the VP9 series barrels. So how are they made? Well, in Germany, the barrels come in as blanks, and they're pretty big. They're about the size of a baseball bat, and they are inserted into one of our cold hammer forging machines after the barrel blank is deep drilled, and a mandrel is inserted that has the polygonal rifling imprinted on it. And then those barrels go into the cold hammer forging machine, and then 4 hammers imparting 140 tons of pressure, 1,000 beats per minute, will compress that and elongate that initial barrel blank out into a point where for pistols you can usually get about 9 barrels cut out of that initial blank. When they come out, they're about this diameter that you see here. And then they go into its initial manufacturing process, where you can see this is an example of that, where it is cut down to the correct diameter, this one being a 9mm barrel. And then it goes into the next step where this larger rear section is then cut to create, the chamber area and the feed ramp and the locking block. And then once all that's done, it then goes on to its final finishing to what you see here. The barrels are all designed to have a minimum service life of 15,000 rounds, but everybody is well aware that they go well beyond those numbers, and some of the ones that we've had back in here from service are just absolutely astounding. Some of the key features you'll notice on our barrels specifically, if you look inside, you'll see an additional step in the chamber area. This is actually called a fouling ring. Some of you guys may not know, but in 9mm rounds, they're slightly more tapered at the front and the rear, and this provides a greater seal around the chambered cartridge. And you may have noticed this if you've ever picked up some of your empty casings. When you're on the range, you might see a single black ring around the empty casing. That's from the sealing ring. The other thing you'll notice if you're not familiar with H&K weapons is the polygonal rifling. It does not use lands and grooves, more of a traditional style that you would see with these deep grooves along the inside of the barrel. And the reason why that is that this is going to add to the longevity and the ease of maintenance, where you don't have carbon building up in there, but it also gives you more accurate and better velocity around those. If If you have traditional lands and grooves, as the bullet's going down the barrel, some of that gas is able to sneak by the bullet itself through those openings. With the polygonal rifling, as you see, without that, those pressures are kept in behind the bullet. So really cool. And it's one of the things that should not be overlooked, the quality of the steel in that cold hammer forging process. Not only is that going to mean your barrels are going to last incredibly long, but one of the big concerns we have with barrels, and depending on your experience level, you may have seen this, is the chance of having a malfunction related to ammo in your barrel. You might have heard what's called a squib round. I've seen this numerous times in the training courses I've taught. I've seen it numerous times on guns that people have sent in to me for service. And that's where an underpowered cartridge is able to fire but not have enough oomph to get out the barrel, and it ends up lodging it somewhere down the length of the barrel. The shooter doesn't notice that, pulls the trigger again, fires another cartridge behind it, and knocks those ones out. And what can happen in a lower quality barrel is that barrel can actually split. The receiver frame can split. You can have catastrophic damage of your weapon and an injury to yourself. In the H&K barrels, sometimes the owners don't even know that they've had the damage to it, and the only way that they'll be able to say something's wrong is their slide will lock back the rear and they can't get it to go forward again. And the reason why that is that squib round, instead of splitting the barrel and destroying everything, it'll just create a small bulge in the barrel that is now preventing the barrel from moving through the opening here at the tang and the slide. And the gun will come in and we'll massage it enough to get the slide off, and then you'll have to look really closely, and sometimes you'll just barely be able to see the bulge, or you'll look inside and you'll see what looks like a dirty carbon ring in one spot on there, and that's where the rifling got blown out in that round. But you can literally file down the bulge and put it back in the gun, and H&K's testing for decades now has specifically done that. And they will put it back in the gun, take it back in the range, and they'll see a negligible difference in the accuracy of the pistol at that point. So what you're getting with the quality of these barrels is more than just a gun that's going to shoot accurately and shoot for a long time. It also minimizes the damage and risk to the shooter in those kind of situations. And like I said, if you've been around shooting long enough, you will see that over and over again. In lesser quality guns, it can be a big problem. Okay, now before moving on to all the different variants, let's take a moment to talk about the receivers. Being able to use the armor or cutaway model here allows us to see a little bit more inside. And what you'll probably notice here are the steel reinforced inserts. You can see this black portion here. It extends here, and this silver portion here. This additional metal portion here, this locking block area, this is separate. It comes out with all the other internal components, but this portion and this portion are actually part of the receiver mold. So all the lower receivers are done in a clamshell design where there's a left side and a right side, and you will actually insert these two metal pieces into one of those sides, close the two clamshells together, pour in all of the polymer and beads, and then about a minute later, it'll come out as the bare shell with those two steel inserted areas included. And then all the other internal components will be added. Of note, with the VP9 series, is the ejector is now part of a housing in the rear that is removable. It's held in place by this pin. Unlike the earlier designs, the USP and Ford, the ejector is part of the steel inserts into the mold. So if you had damage to your ejector on one of those, you'd have to replace the entire lower receiver. Now on the VP9 series, if this was somehow damaged, you would just replace it, which is a neat feature. Another unique feature inside here, you can probably see this kind of coiled, braided form spring here on the right side of the ejector lever. I'm sorry, the right side of the magazine well. This works to provide additional rebound pressure instead of forcing it all on the trigger return spring. So not only does that mean that this VP9 series has a nice light, crisp trigger, but it also means it has a very responsive reset in part due to this additional form spring. This is actually a carryover from the original Mark 23 design. Many people won't know, but the Mark 23 does not have a traditional trigger return spring here. It only uses a form spring to do both duty. Here on the VP9 series, it's added along with a trigger return spring. This is also a feature if you've ever had time to spend with an MP7. MP7 has a similar design, but it's on the left side of the magazine well on that pistol. So pretty cool. Okay, next in line in the different variants of the VP9 series was the release of the VP9 SK or subcompact. This followed in suit, as you would expect, as we'd done this with the P2000 and P30 series. So to carry this over to the VP9 series was an obvious choice. Has all the same form and function features of the standard VP9 and shares many of the same components. The primary difference is it has a shorter receiver here at the front, a shorter barrel length and slide length, and then the grip has been cut down as well. Still has all the exchangeable grip panels and everything else corresponds. You can see here this has the 10-round magazine with the pinky extension base. This does not increase your capacity, just allows you to get your 3 fingers on the grip. It also came with a 10-round magazine that was a flush base, which does not allow you to get your finger on the grip. This will accept all of the other magazines. So your 15-round magazine for the VP9 series would fit, and all of those that have followed after. We also offered extended magazines. Now you can see this is a 15-round magazine that has a grip extension to it. So I get the capability of having more capacity, but now a full grip. They've made these in different capacities as well. So you can have the standard 10, you could have a 13, a 15, and now a 17-round extended magazine compatibility for you. But that's your VP9 SK, okay? With this, we also saw the incorporation of a button mag release option. So now we have a VP9, and what you'll notice, these are marked B. And this now, instead of having a paddle mag release, was available as a button mag release. So I have a button here, and this is reversible. So if I'm a right-handed shooter, I'm obviously going to actuate it here. If I'm a left-handed shooter, I would take this, flip it over the other side, and work it that way. So those people who are coming from guns that used a button mag release, you now have the option in the VP9 series to order a button style magazine release. Then we came up with the VP9L or long slide. You can see this is a paddle mag release model. Also, it could be VP9LB for button magazine release. Again, all the same features here on the receiver, but now we have a longer slide. You can see that there are cuts here in the barrel. In the slide, and a longer slide and barrel combination. Okay. This one here showcases the update that would later come on the VP9 series of the optics ready variant. The original pistols, came with just iron sights. We then upgraded in 2020 to the optics ready model, which now had a removable plate here at the top and would allow you to then purchase a mounting plate for the optic of choice and then mount your optic directly to the slide. In order to do that, what they had to do was change the rear sight dovetail to provide more length. You can see this rear sight has now been redesigned. It's much shorter in length than what we had before. The front sights remain the same length as before. In order to use something that was already in the system, H&K went to the P2000 style dovetail. So if you're looking for sights for that, they are cross-compatible between the P2000 and the VP9 optics ready model. One nice thing about the way they cut this is you'll notice that it comes deep down here into the slide, and then whatever optic mounting plate you would have would fit on there. This helps, this additional cut there and there helps seat your optic down into the top of the receiver so that when the weapon is recoiling, it's got additional purchase in there. Some of the other companies that have done this have just tried to mount it up higher, and then I don't have this additional recess point in there, and you can have problems with the optics coming off, especially if you're racking across the top and the other recoil impulse features on there. But this was the long slide version that we created really for the competition market. This was carried over to create a match variant. The match variant looks very much similar to the long slide, except it's just slightly longer. Whereas this was about a ½ inch longer than before, now we go another ½ inch longer. This variant is actually one of my personal guns that I brought in to showcase. You can see it's got some additional features, but if I compare the VP9 match to the VP9L, you're going to notice that it has the same cuts here on the top of the slide, but now the barrel and slide are slightly longer, and I've got 2 more additional cuts there, as well as a longer cut here at the base in the match. The other difference here that you will see that's on my gun that's not on the L here are I have the accessory option taller, or what we normally call suppressor height sights. And what these allow me to do is once I mount an optic like I have here, a Trijicon SRO, it allows me to co-witness through the bottom of the optic that I can't do with the standard height sights. So if you get yourself an L or a match and you want to, or any of the other optics ready models, and you want to mount your optic on there and it needs to be higher, you can go to our web shop and order your suppressor height sights to add to there. You'll also notice that my VP9 match has an addition of an H&K magwell on here and a different magazine. This is our 20-round magazine. We offer the 20-round magazine that comes with most guns, or as an accessory option, looks like this. A larger grip extension, which allows you to basically fill the void here on the base. With this additional extension here on my match, they had to redesign the base plate in order to fit inside there. Please don't go into the comment section and ask for this. This is not an option here in HK USA, this mag well extension, this mag specifically. This is something I was able to procure through Germany. It's currently just not available. If you get a match, it's going to come in the US spec with this standard configuration at this time. But I wanted to showcase really kind of how I configured my specific pistol. But those are the different variants of the VP9 series, as well as the tactical. VP9 tactical is just a standard VP9, but with a longer threaded barrel. You can see one here mounted with a suppressor from B&T here in the gray room. These, obviously, you would want to either add an optic if you have the optics ready model, or get taller suppressor height sights so you can see over. But another popular option in the VP9 series, if you want to mount a suppressor, this is available in the standard size of VP9. Okay. Once the optics ready variants came out, and we were able to offer a specific package, because a lot of people were asking to say, hey, can we get an optic with that? We were able to partner with HoloSun and create the HoloSun SCS package. So you can see this is a VP9 optics ready model that comes with the HoloSun optic already attached to it. What you'll notice about the HoloSun is this was a collaboration directly with H&K. It does not require the optics mounting plate that you have to have for other optics. This allows this sight to sit lower, and the benefit of that is you are able to co-witness your standard height sights through the bottom of the optic. You don't have to use taller sights, and it becomes more compact. So if you're looking for a more compact option, the SCS package is the way to go. It's offered in our full size as well as our subcompact VP9 series, and has been for several years. So that carries you through the standard VP9s. I'll show you a quick look inside the slides of these different models so you can see how it looks different. On the left, I have an L. In the center, I have a standard VP9, and on the right, I have a VP9 SK. You can see the different links in the slides. These two recoil assemblies are the same length. This one obviously is different. The traditional recoil spring assembly uses a flat wire spring, and the SK model uses a dual recoil spring assembly. The benefit of the dual recoil spring assembly is I don't have as much real estate as I have in the larger size guns. So this allows me to dissipate the energy and the force between two different springs instead of one spring. So instead of having to compress one spring this far, I only have to condense this spring that far and that spring that far. So allows us to get the same kind of reliability across all the different calibers in a smaller size. Okay, now let's talk about what I know you've been waiting for, the VP9 A1 series. And really, I like to start off with a why. Why would we come up with this next evolution? And that should be pretty obvious. We've had a decade since 2014 with the original release, and all of these other different models, variants we've had to really have time behind the guns and to collect plenty of user feedback on the weapons. And that's allowed us to find out how do we improve something that we already think is great. We are confident when we say that we believe the VP9 series is your best bang for the buck purchase that you can make in a semi-automatic pistol. And now we think it's even better. So our focus in the A1 series was to improve and enhance that engagement between the shooter and the pistol. And we're confident that we've done so here with the VP9 A1 series. So let's showcase these two models, and then I'll talk about all of the similarities and differences as we go through. The first one in the line is the VP9F. Okay. F stands for full size. And of course, there's a why behind this. Why would we make a different model than we've had before? And it comes down to requirements. We had a requirement for a contract that required the pistol to be just slightly longer than a standard VP9. And that's what we've done. Once you have a contract requirement to build a new pistol, well, then we can offer that onto the commercial market when we're done. And that's what we've done here. So the F is just slightly longer here in the front in both slide and barrel than our original VP9. And I could hold them up against each other, but I think what you're really going to notice is if I take a close look here. There's the end of the receiver. The receiver is the same length as before, but now you can see we've changed the slide and barrel length to it. What it really does is it bridges the gap between what was the original VP9 and the VP9L. Now, with the F, you can see there's only about a half-inch difference between it and the L. We don't get the serrations or the ports on the barrel. You don't get the O-ring on the barrel on the L, but you get the additional length here with the F-size pistol. Okay. With the release of the VP9A1F, we are discontinuing the original VP9 series. And the reason why is because we have now bridged that gap with this longer model and what comes next in the VP9K or compact. The VP9K now bridges the gap between what is the F and what was the VP9 SK or subcompact. And the reason for that is with the release of the CC9 as our new micro compact pistol, now the SK just seems to be a little bit overly large for what it's really delivering. The VP9 SK versus the original VP9 is just slightly shorter in the length here at the barrel and the slide and receiver, but it was also significantly shorter in your grip area than an original VP9. Okay. The challenge with this from an operator standpoint, and this is my personal opinion on the matter, is most of the people that I saw, including myself, that were utilizing these guns weren't running the flush fit 10-round magazine. We were all wanting some kind of extended capacity for, more ammo on the gun, but also so I can get a fuller grip. If I can get all my fingers and hand around a grip on the pistol, I'm going to be able to shoot it better, especially more rapidly. But what we found when we do reloads is I would hit the magazine release, and because my full grip is around the grip extension, the magazine wasn't going to fall free. That became a frustration point. Now with the K, we are keeping the same length of slide and barrel as the original VP9, but we are elongating the the receiver slightly longer than on the VP9 SK and slightly shorter than on a VP9. So if I put these two together next to each other like this, you'll see, okay, it's a little bit shorter on that model. Take the magazine out. A little bit longer than on the SK. Sorry, that's probably a better representation there. But I get a full grip and I get a 15-round magazine. So now no longer do I have the issues when I'm trying to do reloads where I have to change my grip up. This, in my opinion, is a real sweet spot in the VP9 series. I've been a huge fan of the CC9. As I mentioned in that video, I got way early access to that, was carrying it all through the summer and up to this point. It is a excellent lightweight concealed carry everyday type pistol, but as I get into the cooler months like we are right now, that allows me to dress around a larger gun, and there are obvious benefits about having a larger pistol, and this K really falls into that sweet spot for me. So I've been really happy with this. Again, 15-round magazine, but it will accept all of the other magazines that we have. The VP9 17-round mag is going to stick out slightly on the base. You can put the 20-round mags and so on. Just a little bit more capability on there. So while I've got this on here, great time to showcase this. This is the Surefire XR1 weapon mounted light. This is an inert model that I'm using here on my gray room example, but we've been able to mount these and test these with a weapon. Been really happy with this if you're looking for a compact but capable weapon mounted light for your VP9 series pistol. Been really happy with that. This also gives me the opportunity to showcase on the VP9F. As you can see here, this is our SCS package. Just like we've done on the previous VP9 series pistols, we're now offering this on the A1s, both the F and the K. The great advantages of this are, first of all, in the collaboration with HoloSun, you now get a low profile optic that does not require a mounting plate like all the other optic options do. This allows it to sit lower and co-witness through the bottom of the optic with the standard height sights. You don't have to change these out to get suppressor height sights as backups. And unlike any other example, you're going to have to go buy the gun and then the optic plate and then the optic and mount it all yourself. This is going to come with the optic already mounted from H&K. So if you're looking for an option like that, the SCS packages will do. Now let's look at the specific features of the A1. On here on the slide, you're going to notice that we've taken a look at the Kopfschwimmer model that the German contracts had, and we've increased the number and the depth of the serrations here on the front and rear. So whether you want to charge at the front or the rear of the weapon, you're going to find that interface is improved. It's got the updated charging supports that we did on the original OR update, so you can grasp these even better than you had before. And these are going to be available with either the tritium front and the blacked out rear as standard, or you can get a blacked out front or tritium rear and change those combinations. Here on the texture, I don't know if you may have even noticed until I pointed it out, but on both sides of the receiver, you now get this additional textured section. This is just a huge improvement for me. I don't know about you guys, but for years I've been putting skateboard tape up in these positions, as a contact or reference point. When I come off the trigger and I'm doing reloads or malfunctions on the weapon, it allows me to always know that my finger is where it needs to be and where it doesn't need to be. So that's great. And then for the support hand, as I build my grip, this is exactly where I'm putting my thumb every single time, so I know I've got a good solid grip as I close it down and move back to shooting again. So really happy that those have been integrated into it. The grip texture has been slightly changed, and then if you notice here on the front strap, we have removed the finger grooves. It is now a smooth, there's no longer bumps. It's not smooth, it's got texture, but it's now straight there. When I first saw this, I thought, man, I don't know if I'm gonna like that, but I'm telling you, it feels excellent, and the improvement in my recoil management and grip has really been there. Additionally, going on to the grips, I mentioned before with the original VP9 series, we had exchangeable grip panels on the side and on the back strap, 3 sizes, small, medium, and large. With the A1 series, we've added 2 more back straps. You can see here, this is the large extended with this increased beaver tail and depth from front to rear. We also are offering in the box, it'll come with the medium extended, again with this additional beaver tail. What this allows you to do is not just get an increased swell in the palm, but now I'm increasing the length of pull from the front to the rear, from the trigger to the grip. Now this will allow even more enhancement to ensure that you can get the center of the pad, the most distal part of your finger, on the center of the trigger, increasing your performance as a shooter. And anybody who's been in competition or spent a whole lot of time training will tell you it's all about these marginal gains of improvement. How do I find a little bit of interface improvement to get better and better and better? And these changes are doing just that. If you look at the base here, you'll notice a change now to the magazine base plate. You can see that from the original VP9 series, where we had this little scalloped cutout on the bottom of the magazine well to allow us to strip and rip the magazine, we've changed that and textured it now on the base plate of the magazine, which again gives you that same capability, but it's been done so we can now flare the magazine well on the pistols to improve your reloads with the magazines. So another great enhancement. Looking internally to the weapon, we've always believed that we have a class-leading trigger with a lightened trigger pull, a crisp break, and a responsive rebound. But now you will see on the A1 models, we have included a nickel Teflon coated trigger bar to reduce the friction and improve the interface between the trigger and the shooter even more. So another worthy enhancement to the trigger. So I hope that that covers all of the questions and things that you may want to know, not just about the VP9A1 series launch, but the whole VP9 series. I know it can probably be a little dry at some points, but if you stuck with me, you probably learned something about the pistols or answered some questions you might have had. If you need more specific information about the VP9A1 series, obviously I encourage you to go to the H&K website, look at all the product launch information, and that kind of carries me over to where I'll wrap up this video. With my new position with H&K, the primary role I have as business development manager is to carry the clipboard across all of the different departments here within H&K and with our interface with H&K Germany in our product line. So, continuing to manage the current products we have, but also to manage the upcoming development and release products that we have coming down the line. And I say that because I want you, when you see me at a training event, at a demo, at a show or expo, please come up, introduce yourself, tell me your H&K story, the things that you really like about your H&K weapons and the constructive criticism you have and desires for future insets, because well, that's really what I'm focusing on here in this role. And as much as I may think that we have all the ideas and solutions, we value the input from our commercial and LE and military customers on on what you want to see in our current product line and the things that we're working on in the future. So with that, I thank you guys for joining me, and I really look forward to seeing you, not just in the next video, but out there outside of the gray room.